So cool to be in a real conference. 2 years of, I guess, Zoom and virtual meetings. So grateful to be here. So we're going to talk about product and marketing and how they can work together. Who here has been in a meeting with product where marketing has no idea what the product does? Well, I have been in these meetings as well, where there is confusion, chaos, finger pointing, and no accountability. And when that happens, usually we miss deadlines, we waste resources. At the end of the day, there's a failed product and there are unhappy customers. And who faces the brunt of this the most? Our friends in sales. Because they are the ones taking our messaging, and they are the ones taking the product from engineering, and when the messaging and the product does not match, what happens? This happens, right? We hope Will Smith is not the customer here, but. So we're going to talk about how these two functions can work together. My name is Arvind, and I am a product manager at Microsoft Teams. I have been in the industry for 15 years in product marketing role and product management role. And while I was in product marketing, it was a lot of fun to blame product team for everything. Because you know what? The sales are down because the product sucks, right? And when I moved to product, then, of course, the marketing was to be blamed because we created a great product. But guess what? Marketing did not do a good job at messaging it. But the key takeaway for me over the last 15 years has been that both product and marketing are very important roles, and there is overemphasis sometimes in the company for the product to work with engineering and marketing to work with sales. But in today's tech world, guess what is important? It's the product and the marketing team that needs to work as closely or even more closely as possible. So in today's session, I'm going to talk about how product and marketing can collaborate, and we are going to look at it through a lens of product lifecycle. What are some red flags to look for in your company, and what are some practical tips for you to take it back to your product teams so that you can be better allies? And at the end, I'm hoping to listen from you as well. So when we think of product lifecycle, at 10,000 feet, it looks something like this. There are variations of this in your company, but in essence, it starts from a discovery phase where we are trying to identify what is the customer pain point. And then we go into a defining state where we are aligning on what is the problem statement that we are trying to solve. Then there is a development phase where we are actually building it. Then we launch it, which is our wheelhouse. And then it doesn't end there because we have to keep supporting the customer after the sale is made. There could be variations of this in your company, but as I'm walking you through this product lifecycle, think about how does it work in your company and what are some practical things you can take back. And pretty much almost always it is never linear, right? It's an iterative process, and there are feedback loops. Any company has two big investments. First big investment is value creation, which is funding the engineering team. What are we going to build? The second big investment is how are we going to sell what we just built, which is the value capture side. There are several stakeholders that are responsible for this. Many are not represented here, like our friends in HR and finance are also very important. But for this presentation's sake, I'm going to focus on the product management, designing engineering, and on the value capture side, we have product marketing, sales, and support. I love the analogy of a cruise ship. So think of your company as a cruise ship. There is a part of the crew that is responsible for running and maintaining the engine. And there is the other part of the crew that is responsible for the customer service and support. And guess what happens when this crew is not talking to the other crew? The cruise ship is going to go in a different direction. The customer is not going to be happy. The boats. And this is holding the telescope, the compass, and telling the engineering team what to build. And on the other end, it's all of us, the product marketers, who's helping the sales define what the messaging is. How do we package it? How do we sell it? So in essence, what product manager is doing is sort of sailing the value creation boat, and what product marketer is doing is sailing the value capture boat. And it's very important for them to get together. So we are going to look at what a product lifecycle typically looks like, and how these two important characters can come together. So the step one of product life cycle is the discovery phase. This is when our goal is to identify what is the pain point of our customer. Who is the persona that we want to target? And what is the overall business opportunity? Where usually this breaks down, and think about your own company and your own experiences. One of the biggest things, product manager has a goal of retention, and the product marketer has the goal of acquisition. So what's going to happen is these things are going to drive different behavior outcomes. So for example, the product management, because they're focused on retention, they are going to be prioritizing features in the product that drive retention, that drive usage, that drive stickiness. But guess what's happening here? The product marketing is not aligned. So then there is no messaging that's going along with all the cool features for retention. On the other hand, if the product marketer is focused on acquisition, now we are thinking of how do we build the top of the funnel, how do we simplify the sign-up process. But guess what? The product itself is so hard to navigate that the customer just gets frustrated and then they bail out. So that is super important for the two teams for having the same goal. What I've seen is different understandings. So for example, in one of my previous roles, there was a metric called active users. Does that sound familiar? So so what was happening is in this situation, I was in marketing, and what we were noticing is that we are doing great. Our metric is kind of climbing, while on the product side, they were not seeing the same. And the reason for that was that marketing was defining active user as somebody who's signing up to the product. And the product was defining active user as somebody who's using a feature. So these are two different things. You sign up, but they're not using it. So it's like, you're paying for the gym, but you're not using the gym. Like, that's usually me, but so that's one example. So the first thing that we should do here and be aware of is how do we have common marketing? So here is an example where the goal is to grow acquisition by 15%. See how granular it is, right? So it is super important based on your product, based on your industry. You define a metric that makes sense for both product and marketing. So in this particular case, you can imagine this is going to drive common behavior. For example, now the product can focus on acquisition, meaning simplifying the sign-up process, having features right at the top of the funnel, top of the experience. And likewise, marketing can now look at, okay, what are the messages that I need to embed in the product itself? Or when I'm acquiring customers, what are those key messages? Or what type of marketing should we invest in? So this comes together, and then now we are sailing in the same boat in the same direction. The second thing on the discovery phase, search. And in many cases, from my experience, I've seen it's mostly done in isolation by the product teams and marketing teams. And this is a huge missed opportunity. The ideal way of doing this, where I've seen it succeeds the most, is when a product marketer pairs up with a product manager. And when these two personas go together in front of a customer, they hear different things. And they come back with different insights. And what it also does is that it drives alignment. Because now, the product manager has heard the customer while the product marketer was sitting by them. And when they go back, now they're able to prioritize these features that both of them listen to from the customer and they agree on. And likewise, the product marketer can capture some key messages and pass it on to sales. And those are sort of the important key points that the sellers can use to sell the product. So it's a huge missed opportunity if these two are not paired up in some way to do the research. And once we have done the research, it's also super important to document it and share it. And we have some amazing digital tools to do it. There are a bunch of different applications where you can capture the research findings and then share. And in one of my previous roles, we had a shared research calendar where it's a public one way of sort of is you can also have like a shared space, like a shared channel, where once somebody does research, they share it publicly, and then other folks can ask questions, and that way it is more engaging. And likewise, there is also like a documented archive which you can always go back to. So now we have discovered what the problem is. Now let's sail the ship a little bit further to the define phase. And this is a phase where, again, we see that product teams own this to a large extent, and sometimes marketing teams are blindsided. This is, again, a huge missed opportunity. So here, the thing to note here is that usually product is defining what we are building in isolation, and then the product marketing team is just not involved. So some things that the marketing team can do in this phase of defining what we are building is, for example, being more involved in the specs. So I'm sure in product management, in your company, folks are writing specs. And these specs usually go through a review cycle. So is the marketing involved in that process? So that's, again, an opportunity for you to provide your comments, provide your feedback before the product is actually gone to engineering for building. So that way, we are driving alignment, and there are no surprises at the end that marketing was expecting certain feature to be there, but it's completely missing. And then what's also super important in the define phase is to build a shared understanding what is coming up in the next semester, so that the sellers present could have features. And we have a certain specs, but we are also continuously testing it in parallel. So this is a phase, again, which is mostly owned by the product team, but marketing has a huge role to play here as well. And here, typically, what happens is product management feels like this is our area, and we are going to just build it with engineering. And marketing may feel like, it's coding or building a product. What am I supposed to do here? Again, a huge missed gap here. When I was in a product management role, I'm still in product management role, one of the things we face is that access to customer. So there are occasions where there is a new feature, and while we are building it, we want to prototype it. And prototypes can range from low fidelity to high fidelity. So sometimes it is as simple as a sketch where the designer has come up with the iteration, and we want to test it. But guess what? A lot of product managers don't have access to customers. So this is one area where marketers can actually help, because we are much more closer to the actual customer. So some ways that the marketing team can help product teams is in the form of helping the product manager getting in front of customers, either through interviews, focus groups, discovery sessions. We talked about 404 test page in one of the previous presentations, which is, in one of my jobs, we had created like a test of a prototype, which looks like a real web page, but then you kind of ship it, and then you see how many customers are actually clicking it. So when they click on it, buy now, that takes you to a 404 error page. But then there is no better signal than actually sending it out rather than asking the customers what you want. So this is a real indicator of will your customers click on that buy button. These are some ways marketing can create a control and then help the product send this message, a survey, or this focus group. We go into marketing launch. And here again, the area feature. And when that happens, there is again a huge missed opportunity. So here, I want to share two examples. The first example is of Expedia.com page. So over here, if we tie back to the original goal where we all started in the discovery phase, what is our aligned goal? So in this case, I would imagine for somebody like Expedia or Booking.com, the goal is conversion. And at this point, you can see a customer is on your web page in Expedia.com. They are researching the different travel options. They're looking at the lowest cost, convenience. And at this point, it is super important to have the right message at the right time. So in this case, how product and marketing can work together in launch is identifying the customers who have the highest propensity to convert, and what are the certain types of messages that you would want to show. There are some customers that are price sensitive. There are some customers that are value sensitive. So what are the kind of offers you would want to show based on specific customer set? And the other example is, again, Expedia.com, and this is on the mobile app. And over here, I would imagine that the goal is retention, because in this case, they have built messaging inside the mobile app itself. So there's a loyalty program, and over here, we are showing the customer that you can gain points if you basically take this offer. And in the agile world and in the cloud world today, it is super important not to stop helping the customer after we launch, because in many cases, our job actually continues even after we ship the product. So in the support phase, the usual red flag is that product is just involved in fixing the bugs, because once we have shipped the products, Now our customers are using it, they find some bugs, they are reporting it, and product is too hyper-focused on just solving those bugs. But what is the missed opportunity here is the feedback. Because customers are also telling you, what features do we want next? Areas that you guys can improve in performance. We need to capture all of that and loop it back to our discovery phase. In this current world, where there is subscription lower and lower, it's everyone's job. And in fact, Amazon does it to their need. And over here, put back to discovery, and product lifecycle is iterative in nature. So whatever you learn here, you put it back. So by now, I'm sure we all think PMs and PMMs are the heroes here. That's the new Top Gun reference. But in reality, PMs and PMMs are sort of these warriors. Right? If you think about it, our sellers are the pilots or the heroes that are trying to sell the product. And on the engineering side, we have heroes who are sort of building the product. And there's one quote that resonated really deeply with me is that PM and PMM roles are sort of optional. Because without us, engineering will still build something, sales will still sell something. It may not be ideal, but it's possible. So that sort of resonated with me, and it also reminds me that there's humility that's needed in the job. It's important to be aligned with the product team so that we can help each other make the company more successful. So as you go back, think about the product lifecycle in your company. Think about how well do you know the product manager. There could be more than one. Think about the shared goals. I think we have an opportunity here as marketers to be working very closely with product managers because we have a common objective, which is to help the customer. Think about the planning cycle in your company. Do you do planning every 6 months, 3 months? That is your window of opportunity to create a shared goal. Make that goal smart. Make that goal as granular as possible so that it is driving common behavior. Think about building a culture of experimentation. So next time when you go back, sit with your product manager and think of what are the different experimentation opportunities. Are there places where marketing can be more involved? And likewise, if marketing is doing research, are there opportunities for product teams to be more involved? Is there a shared space in the company where you're sharing this research? Is there a shared research calendar, for example? And is this something that you can invest in? There will always be fuzzy areas. There is no company I would imagine that has clearly defined this is product marketer's role, this is product manager's role. There will be overlaps. And when that happens, reach out. And reach out to basically get more clarity and define what specifically you would do versus what the product manager is doing. Because ultimately, create a frictionless. Can you share, what just happened? My leadership seems scared of term launch and marketing moments. So in the agile world, we have to constantly, because every product, every company is going to be different. From my experience, what I have seen is there are different ways you can do launch. There could be an internal launch, so test it out with your own employees, what we call as dog fooding. There is a control group launch. There could be customer advisory board members. There are some set of customers that you have, you can launch with them and see get early feedback. There could be beta tests, there could be prototypes. So there are many ways you can actually iterate. So I think here the guiding principle in Agile essentially is that I'm not going to spend a lot of time and build something perfect, but put the better in front of perfect, right? So break it down into small features, test it with smaller groups, and then expand. Does that answer your question, whoever asked that? Awesome. Does your process change at all if the product being developed is hardware instead of software? Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, so I worked in Corning. So Corning makes Gorilla Glass. Gorilla Glass is the glass on your phone and all the devices. So that's the glass that originally, the little story here is that when iPhone 1 was being developed, it was supposed to have a plastic screen. And actually, Steve Jobs put this phone in his pocket, and the keys scratched it. So then they went back to a company called Corning, which is based in upstate New York. And they asked, is it possible to build a glass that will not scratch and not break? I'm sure all of you have broken iPhones, but it is still way better than plastic. I can guarantee that. So my learning from that Corning Gorilla Glass was that, again, it may depend on the type of product, but glass, for example, was a product where we could still be iterative in many ways. Because working closely with the customer, in this case, Apple was important, and with requirements where they want heavier, deeper, software development or cycle, because build that scratch. But I would imagine things like there is still prototypes out of testing it in this case. The guiding principle again here is to test it before you make it perfect. Do you use any tools to internally share research or insights? Yes. Yeah. So I'll give you a few pointers on how I have seen research being shared. The first thing is having a shared digital space. This could be SharePoint. This could be Teams, Slack, whatever you use. So build a research channel and start putting everything there. Invite all the stakeholders to that channel. That's step one. Step two is communicating the research. So whenever some research is done, make it a practice. I know this is tough because once the researcher does the research, it takes a lot of time to document it and then share it. But if you build it into the culture, where in the form of brown bags or lunch and learns, this researcher is now able to share those insights on a regular basis. Maybe it's weekly or monthly or bi-weekly, however you want to do it. The third thing is to have some sort of a quarterly alignment meeting. If you have heard of design sprints, what Google does, it's essentially a workshop which is time capped within 1 week. So you start on a Monday, you end on a Friday. So on Monday you saw the 5 steps of product lifecycle. So you sort of go through it, but in a very, very rapid manner. So you could take an event. When you do value. See the value of PM. So I think PM and PMM are bidirectional, right? So in my experience, where I've seen like this particular scenario to happen is when the goals are misaligned. So in a situation I had shared where PM is focused on retention, PMM is focused on acquisition, it's going to drive different behaviors, and both these teams are not going to talk to each other. So I think the first thing over there is think of your planning cycle, and in the next planning cycle, see how can you have a shared goal for both the teams. So that's automatically going to drive more communication between the two. The second thing is, if you know your PM, there is also an opportunity to find out what challenges are they facing and how can you also bring value. So that way, you build a mutual trust. So as an example, I had mentioned in my presentation that a lot of PMs actually struggle to find real customer to talk to. So let's say I want to test something this evening because tomorrow morning I have to go back in my engineering sprint. But there's no way to validate this idea. So as a PMM, if you can offer that help that, hey, I have a customer, you can just, I can help you connect with this customer. So that's a straight value add. And if you do these things over a period of time, your PM will start trusting you more, and it's bidirectional, as I said. I think PMM helps PM and the PM helps PMM. So that's one way of sort of building that muscle in the company. Does that answer the question? Okay. How do you handle information overload when interviewing customers? So much feedback, ideas. Yeah. So over here, again, it depends on type of the research, whether it's qualitative research or quantitative research. With quantitative research, you can be more structured. You can ask specific to find form of how we are else. So instead, so that is listening. Once we are capturing the feedback, in that shared space, you can try to categorize them into certain buckets. For example, maybe there is an industry bucket. You want to break it down by retail, healthcare, sports, whatever categories you have. You can also break it down by features. That's another way of capturing it in a group consolidated manner. And then you can start prioritizing it in your planning cycle or day-to-day sprints where when PM is looking at all the different features in the backlog, they can start scoring it. How heavy do you weigh inputs from researchers? Yeah, so Gartner is used very, very commonly. So currently I work in Microsoft, and Gartner is like the gold standard for sort of showcasing where the product is. So Gartner, I have seen being used mostly as sort of a external metric where we want to show the market, the customers, the partners that our product is best in class. In terms of product development, you can use it as like an indicator, but not necessarily informing you that this is the right product to build. Is that how you're using Gartner? Yeah, yeah. There's also another research company called GLG. So GLG also helps you connect with experts. If you have, really this is good where discovery phase, but you have a big customer and specifically time-bound, the frameworks that impact and effort. Basically, if you're looking to impact, what KPI will in your company? Cost is how many months is it going to take the engineering to build it? Effort is, what is it going to take to sell? So you can use that framework. There are other frameworks. I think in all essence, it sort of boils down to what is the impact and what is the effort. So you can look at those two metrics, and there are different ways of doing it. Some companies I've seen do it in the form of, you get a group of people in the room, everyone scores it on a scale of 1 to 10, and you can see the weighted average of each of these, and then you can rank it. You can do it in a qualitative way where you have a whiteboarding session where you take all the ideas and then you start pitching it. So that's a few ways of approaching. How can PMM show their value to PM? Who wants to just build what's Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, it is the customer that matters, right? I'm sure even as marketers, we have some passion projects. There are our favorite customers who we want to sell to. We want to take their feedback and we want to build things for them. Likewise, on the product side, there are also similar things where and a product manager or an engineer might be very passionate about a feature. But where we can all come to the same page is bringing the customer in the center. And as much as data-driven that we can make it. What problem is this specific feature going to solve that you want to build? How is it going to help our business metric? How is it going to address the pain point that the customer has? How many customers is it going to help? Right? So if you can answer these data-driven questions and put the customer in the middle, then it is going to be more unbiased, and you can eventually drive to the common thing. Is that the last? All right. Thank you so much.